La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So, since this conference subheading is Decree and Destiny, um, many awliya Allah and great teachers and beings like Imam Jafar as-Sadiq and Imam Ali, when they were asked about this idea, and I think we shared it the other day, but I want to bring it up again, about what is the difference between decree and destiny, qadar wa qada, that it's been something which scholars have written about for thousands of years, well, thousands in our deen, but even in thousands of years in many other prophetic traditions. Is everything just decreed, or do we have a role in life and in how things come about? And when they were asked about this, they all, the ones who I am referring to here, they would raise their hand and they would say, it's not that and it's not this. It's decree and it's destiny. It's both decree and destiny. That somehow there is that we as human beings have a role in our destiny, in what Allah decrees. And I once asked Sheikh Fadlallah about this, had a discussion with him regarding this question. And he said that, well, in one sense, your death is decreed. Everybody will die. Kulla nafsi dha'ika maut. Every self will taste death. It's an interesting thing to reflect on. Every self will taste death. But he said, how you die is somewhat in your hands. If you are in your life acting in a way with intention to resonate and harmonize with Allah's decree, that means that encompasses your how you treat your body, how you treat others, how your condition of your psychological sort of state has ultimately an effect on how you will leave this world. So, in a way, what I understood from that is that there are decrees which you cannot escape, but your interplay with that is somewhat in your hands, and especially if you are harmonizing and seeking to unify with the will of Allah, with Allah's decree. So it affects you. I once asked him about why certain awliya live a long time. We were talking about certain personalities, like I knew a sheikh in Pakistan. He died at 163 years old. I know it sounds fantastic, but there's documents that have shown him that he did, and I met him, and I met his son, one of his sons, who was 100 years old. And but he lived his life. I asked him, in fact, I said, well, how come you live so long? You know, just straight up. I just said, how is it that you're so old? And he said, I've traveled the east of this world and the west of this world and the north of this world and the south of this world. He said, and all I've ever seen was the mercy and the hand of Allah in it. So that was his key to what he was trying to communicate to me, to Allah's gift of longevity. There's another tradition where, and maybe Sheikh Muslim knows it, where a person was given a wahi that the angel came to him and said that he was going to die, and told him the date and time of his death. And instead of him going crazy and buying a Ferrari and going to Las Vegas, and all this, which is what most people probably would do, he took all of his money and he started feeding the poor and started helping people who were destitute. And he knew when he was going to die, and so he said, I'm just going to do this till I die. The day came for him to die, and he didn't die. And that night he begged Allah. He said, "Why would I be given? Was it a false premonition or revelation to me? What was it?" And he said that an angel came to him and said that before you knew that, you were only acting for your own self. But now you're a helper of Allah, and Allah has extended your life to be in use to His creation. So I don't know, you have to take that and make something of it for your own. At least you know that one thing from this is that if you do live a life which is sharing with other people, what Allah has given you, whatever it is, whether it is your smile or food, whatever you can give, the light from your heart that you can share with other people, that's the best way to live. At least you'll live well. They asked Imam Ali once about, they said, how do you know about the akhirah? And he said, I don't know, but I know that if I live this way, this is the best way to live. So, I'm already experiencing the best of it now. And so if I have the best of it now, I know I'll have the best of it later. So there's something about decree and destiny that needs to be unpacked for individually and understood. I want to also say one thing before I tell this story, that there, in this little circle that I drew with the kind of the two rays coming out, there already is an overarching narrative of decree that we're all subject to. So each one of us is already tracked, stamped in our essence and in our creation by the initial will and desire of Allah to be known and to be worshipped. So that is the overarching narrative. And then there's the billions of other narratives that are representative in each one of us. And if you now think about this, it means that your job is to recognize the overarching narrative and unite your narrative with the overarching narrative. So everything that happens to you in life is unique to you and is a doorway and a potential for you to unite with the overarching narrative and desire of and purpose in Allah's decree. So stories and things that happen to you, like things that happen to me, to happen to you, these are all things that are containers of metaphors, meanings, bridges, windows, teachings, however you want to look at it, so that you remember the higher metaphor and you enter into that. So my stories are not for entertainment, although they're pretty entertaining, some of them. But the thing is, I have to be careful. We have to be careful not to get identified with the uniqueness, and let it fall into the self of being somehow I have had this experience in my own self of sort of Hajj Mustafa, the storyteller. It's laughable. But because that's not who I am, it's not who you are. You're not the storyteller, you're not the father, you're not the mother, you are all those things, but you're more and more, But, some of these things can get you hooked up and before you know it, you're a personality. I mean, we already are a personality, but I'm saying a personality which stops you from light. So you have to be very careful about identifying too much with the things that happen to you, making too special things that happen to you. So I'll tell you, I'd like to share some stories. What did I can't remember the two stories I already told. I think I told everybody the other day about what happened in the airport. Did you had that already, right? Yeah. And you had the one that when I was living in the mosque, right? You already got that one. Well, I'd like to share with you one that Sheikh Bashir, Uthman Bashir. Did I tell you that one yet? No? Okay, good. So I'm going to share that one with you. Oh, actually, did I tell you about Sister Shakura? No. Oh, that's Rahmatullah alayh. I'm going to tell you about that. That's better. I saw Yakuta's face and it told me to say that. So, in 1980, maybe 85 or 86, maybe before, I can't quite remember, I was selling books, Sheikh Fadlal's books. Zara, we had a company called Zara Publications. And I was selling these books at a Islamic conference, one of these ISNA or ICNA, I can't remember what it was, but it was one of those big conferences, thousands of people come and there's booths and, food and all that. So I had a table there and I was just there. I'd never been to, I was Oklahoma. It was, let's see, what's the main city? What's the main, anybody know the main city in Oklahoma? Anyway, I can't remember where it was. Yakuta? Can't. Yeah, let's use Oklahoma City, it doesn't matter. Oklahoma City. So I was in Oklahoma City and there was this big conference at a convention center. And I'm selling books, okay. So all of a sudden I noticed this man is walking back and forth in front of my booth. And he's looking at me. Just looking at me like trying to define me in some way or trying to analyze me, And I didn't at first pay much attention. I thought maybe he's a little out there. So he walked by again and again and again. And then I said to him, can I help you? Is there something I can help you with? He said, I've been watching you. And I really feel like I can share something with you, which I can't share with any of my friends. But I need advice. And I feel that you can tell me the advice. So I said, all right, Bismillah. And he sat down next to me. He was a man from Iraq. He had immigrated to the United States with his wife. They were secular people, although when they came to America, when they were living in Iraq, they were praying and they considered themselves Muslims. And they lived a culturally Muslim life. And they believed in Allah and they read the Quran. He was a very good reciter of the Quran, he said. And he said when he came to America, they lost everything. They started drinking and clubbing and just acting completely outside of the Dar of Islam, the House of Islam. And then he said, and I am now totally transformed. He said, I pray and I don't drink and I don't do any of these things, but my wife does. And so now she's become very antagonistic towards me. When I pray, she comes over and yells at me, why are you doing that? Who are you praying to? She spills food and she soaked his prayer rug once in wine, right? So it became najas. Of course, there's a Rumi metaphor in that. We were just talking. I suggest everybody soak their prayer rug in wine, but not that kind of wine. So he said, I'm hoping that something would happen to her, would change her heart. And I said, well, how long has this been going on? He said, for 2 years now. And I said, if it's 2 years and nothing's changed, I said, there's plenty of other women out there. I'm sure you're a handsome guy. You have a good job. You'll find somebody. You don't have to, do this with her. He says, no. He says, I wish I had a woman like the one who changed my life, right? And I said, really? I said, tell me the story. Like, what was the woman who changed your life? He told me 2 years back, he was at a hospital having a checkup, having some tests done. And over the loudspeaker came a request. It said, does anybody here read Arabic and could read the Quran? This was a hospital in Oklahoma City. And at first he ignored it, but then he looked around, he said, he saw nobody was moving. So he went to the nurse and he said, I can read the Quran. Although, at that time he was drinking and carrying on, he didn't really care. So they brought him to a room And there he came into a room and he said there was a woman, an American lady, dying in bed there in intensive care, and her doctors, some of her family, and the nurses, were all there. And they gave him a Quran to read, right? And she requested that he read Surah Yasin. So he started to read Surah Yasin, and as he was reading it, he explained to me that like a glow came from her face. You know, that as though she was like looking at the face of God. And the nurses in the room, all of them who had been looking after her for so long, had noticed this incredible change. Everybody was awestruck. The doctors, the nurses, her family. There was this moment of like the sun rising, and the room filled with barakah and light. And this man was sitting there who had not picked up the Quran in so many years, was, a drunken, carrying on guy, read the Quran, and as he was reading the Quran, he watched this woman die in front of him. And she died with the words of Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah on her lips as he finished the end of Surah Yasin. And he said that when she passed away, it was like a breeze of angelic wings, came through the room. Now, I don't like to talk like this too much because it's all very romantic and sort of supernatural, but sometimes these things do happen. And he swore at that moment that he would become a hafiz of the Quran, that he would change his life, and he would try to do the same for his family. So he came back to his wife and he said, this happened. And she said, you're out of your mind, and you don't know. And I had this wonderful exchange with him, and then I said, do you remember what the name of this woman was? And it was Shakura. Now what that means is that this is a woman who we knew intimately. She lived at Beit Din. She was in Norwich with us. She was married to Abdul Hai Moore. I think probably you know that name. He was a poet. And Rahmatullah alayhi, he passed away just a few years ago also. But, how did that happen? That I would be sitting in Oklahoma City and this man walks by my booth and tells me this incredible story of transformation of somebody in a hospital there. She was there because her family was there, I knew her intimately. She was a wonderful friend of ours. Her body was brought to Beit Din, where we had a graveyard, and we buried her there. I was there at her funeral when they brought the body from Oklahoma. So this story was very touching, of course, but how did these things happen? How that you could not try to plan this? It's a proof of that Allah's decree is overriding any narrative, any plan. Allahu khairu makirin. Allah's plot is beyond our ability to conceive. We don't know how these things happen, how they arrange themselves to come about. And now here's another interesting aspect of this story. There was, when he left, I took his connection and I stayed in touch with him for many years. He actually finally did divorce this woman, and he got married to a wonderful lady, and he was happy. I don't think he lived happily ever after. But I'm hoping that he lived happily ever after. Now he leaves my table after this incredible effulgent moment and incredible profound moment. Another man comes to my table. Now look, Allah's the juxtaposition of things, the dual nature. Steve Emerson comes to my table. Does anybody know who Steve Emerson is? You can look him up. Steve Emerson worked for the APAC. and AIPAC. AIPAC is the American-Israeli something, where they influence the government in to be pro-Israeli policy and so on. And they wield a lot of power and money. And he also worked for a couple of he was working, he just started a job, he had no money whatsoever, just was starting with them. And he came to me to talk to me about because he noticed I was American, and that he wanted to know the real dirt on Islam, right? Now, after I just spoke to this person, right, who found all the gems and the light and here's somebody that's coming who wants me to spill all the beans on all the dirt on Islam, which he was that dirt was within him. He's looking for himself. And I tried to explain to him that none of these things that he knows, that he thinks he knows about Islam and the path, is true at all. None of it. But because he was looking for that, he was going to find it no matter what. So here's the point that came to me, is that we all get what we intend. If you intend to improve your life, to be in remembrance of Allah, to let go of your expectations, your questions, like you asked me in the break, if you live with that intention to purify yourself, to not allow your nafs the patterns of yourself to overwhelm you, your concepts to take you over, to allow that space in you to have a light, the light of your inner basira, your muraqib, to witness yourself and see yourself, then the nafs takes over, and it'll just go ahead and affirm itself in whatever it is. And that's what most people live. They live a life in which they're driven by their self-form, without any interference. It's just cybernetic. It just, you look out in the world, and sometimes I'm amazed when I look out, no matter where it is, and when I'm in a Muslim country or in the mall in North Carolina, that everybody finds their qawm, their people, if you want to be confirmed all the time in dunya and in miserable sort of ephemeral things, the next pair of shoes, the next lipstick, the next new suit and car, and the next job, and we're all in together. Let's go have a beer and go bowling and I'm like you and you like, this nafs contract of people who have those groups. They find each other and they affirm each other, and it's cybernetic. They live on. Unless Allah loves them. And if Allah loves them, He'll bring disruption to that and break it up. But mostly that's how it is. That's why we here are different in that way. We've come here because we want to be with the people of light. We want to be with the people of dhikr. We want to improve our character. We want to improve ourselves. We want to know our hearts. We want to be with other people. And that in it has its own barakah and its own expansion and its own, we're our own qawm, our own tribe, our own, there are people here that know each other. They're not blood, but they're more close to each other than their brothers and sisters. They're by blood. Of course, with the exception of Sheikh Muslim's family. That it's who you are will bring to you in the world an affirmation, and will bring to you the thing that you intend. If you intend to be something, it'll come to you. All the opportunities will come. And just as you were saying earlier, if you intend to be close, so to speak, close to your heart and discover the reality of your heart, you will. Because Allah loves the person who asks. Allah gives to the person who asks. And why would Allah, if you truly are asking for His light, to just uncover within your heart His light, why would it not happen? He gives this dunya to every single person who wants it. And this dunya is nothing anyway, it's just dhab, it's dust. How much more are you going to receive Allah's mercy if you connect with the overarching narrative of Allah's decree and your destiny to merge with it in resonance so that you receive what your heart is really asking for, which is the Nur al-Azal, which is the light of lights. So that's what this story, unpacked for me, that here was this man, I'll just say it one more time, who was disturbed and distraught, looking for an answer. But he got an amazing answer from the death of our friend Shakura. And of course, mashallah, he took my advice to divorce this woman. And then another man comes looking for misery and dirt, and he wound up being one of the highest paid, highest profile, pro-Israel, pro-Iraq war mongering, guy, and made tons of money, and found his way, and then all of a sudden, they threw him away like a dirty rag, right? Because he started becoming personality so much so that he was so arrogant that nobody could stand him anymore. He wasn't, they threw him off the airways. You look him up. His name is Steve Emerson. And when I first met him, he was completely broke. I bought him Taco Bell. You know what Taco Bell is? It's a cheap taco. Cost $1, right? I bought it for him so he could have some food to eat that day. And then he wound up making millions on the misery and lies of other people. How are we doing on time?
We're doing absolutely fine. There is 25 minutes left for Zohar, so if you want to carry on, that's fine.
Well, I'll just tell, because I'm thinking of Sheikh Bashir, Uthman Bashir, which is the original story I wanted to tell. So I'll share this with you. And this is another story of intuition. You don't ever think that or diminish the idea that you have this intuitive self, that the soul speaks to you, and sometimes it speaks to you in ways which may not at the moment make any sense, like what Sheikh Fredericks was talking about, like this man came and it may not make any sense, but there's some benefit that is derived. You just don't know exactly how it's going to work out. So I'll tell you this story because he's a wonderful being, rahmatullah alayhi, Sheikh Bashir, Uthman Bashir. Whenever I used to go to London in the 80s, we had a center in London between Notting Hill Gate and Queensway on a street called Ossington Street. And Sheikh Bashir, Uthman Bashir, used to come to visit this place and see Sheikh Fadlallah and see he had his murids there in London too. And he was a wonderful being. He used to bring a coffee pot from Ethiopia with his own coffee, and his murids used to come and used to sit on the floor and make coffee on the floor, and they used to sing beautiful dhikr. And so one of these times, because I saw him, mashallah, many times, Assalamu alaikum, Agha. Assalamu alaikum. So he came at one of these times, he arrived at the center, and all of a sudden one of his murids comes and says, there's a wedding in Morocco that they want you to come and to officiate. He said, okay. He said, I'm going to Morocco, right? So he looks at me, he says, can you get me to Morocco, right? Now, in the 1980s, here's a guy from Eritrea, doesn't have a penny in his pocket. He's got a single entry in from the British consulate to enter into England one time, right? And he hands me his passport and says, go down to Cornwall. I think it's Cornwall, or Croydon, thank you. Croydon. Go down to Croydon. Did you know that because he went there, or because do you remember the story?
No, I've been to Croydon.
Okay, so he told me to go down to Croydon and get him a multiple entry visa. Now think about what he's asking me here. It's impossible to do such a thing. So I said to him, Sheikh, I don't think that I can. No. He said, he just dismissed me. He said, just go. He said, go, say Allah and go. I said, okay. So I took his passport and I went down to Croydon. And I walked into the room and there I was. It was like a Pakistani train station. People were laying on the floor on blankets and chadors. And I mean, it was pouring tea and waiting for hours. You know, it's one of those scenes in Croydon. Sikhs and Muslims and Hindus. And so you have to pick a number. And so I picked a number. And there was a guy waiting at the counter. And my number was like 30 or 40. It was a lot. I had to wait. And the good thing I was there, it was early in the morning. So I waited till the number. And it took about 2.5 hours, maybe 3, to get to the front. I get to the front and I say to the guy, this man, and it's not me obviously, wants a multiple visa, right, to this country so that he could go to a wedding in Morocco. And he looked at me like I'm some kind of nutcase. And I would have looked at myself the same way. But I felt like, Sheikh Bashir asked me to do this, and I said, I'm going to do it, right? So he looked at me and he said, no. He said, I can't do this. He said, we don't do this here, right? He said, he has to apply from his country. And first of all, you're not the person, right? So I can't even do it because of that. But he has to apply from his country and he has to get it done through the regular channels. So I said, look, this man is not a normal person. I tried to convince him, I said, he's a saintly being, right? And now this guy really thinks I'm one heck of a nutter. And he looks at me and says, there's the door, get out. So I leave. I go back, I take the bus, train, whatever it was, I came to the subway. I get back, it took me about an hour to get back or something. And I see Sheikh Bashir sitting with, and he's just so casual, sitting, drinking coffee, they're chewing chat and smoking and all this. And he said, where's my passport? I said, well, I couldn't get he said, here. He gave me his tasbih. He said, I want you to say, Ya Sa'iru, Ya Karibu. Ya Sa'iru, Ya Karibu. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, and I know my wife is squinting when I speak Arabic. But it means you who are the quickener and you who are the close, who brings near. Karib. Does that sound right? Yeah, okay. Karib. Ya Sa'iru, Ya Karib. Sa'iru. Naam, Sa'iru. Sarir. Sarir. Yeah. So I was saying that. He said, yeah. So he said, say this dhikr until all the way till you get to Croydon and until you get back to this man, right? So I said, okay, Sheikh, I'll do that. And I took his tasbih, and it was really, his tasbih was so worn out. I took his tasbih and I started saying that, and over and over and over again. Then I got to Croydon, and I took a number, right, again. And now the number was, again, like, it was way 30 or 40 numbers above me. So I sat there in a chair. They have these chairs along the wall, right in front of the counter, which the counter was about 30 feet from me, because there's lots of space in between for people to lay down and have tea and all this stuff that goes on at Croydon. And he looks at me, and he looks at me, and he goes, there's no way. And I'm thinking next he's going to call the police or something. And I hold up the passport, and he goes, no way. So this incredible, I started saying this dhikr over and over again, and he pulls the string of the number, and he goes, click. And he calls the number, right? Nobody comes up. And he clicks it again, and nobody comes up. And okay, 1 or 2 numbers, somebody got tired of waiting, they left. I could rationalize that in my head. But now something else started happening. He started going click, click, click. And I'm feeling this intense first my body was becoming very almost anxious because it was so awesome, what was happening. I just felt like I was about to explode or implode, and I'm looking at him, and his face is turning white, and he's looking at me, click, click, and I'm showing him this. It was insane, and he clicks through, and he clicks right through to my number, right? And by that time, it was the only thing that existed was me and this guy, right? I was in a tunnel with him, right, of some kind of bubble of outer space. And I walked up to him, and he was distraught. He was pale. He was he looked like he was shaking to me. I was. And I said, I told you this man is a saint. I said, this man, I said, did you see what, I just told him right to his face. I said, did you see what happened here? Did you see that this is you can't avoid looking at this, and this is an extraordinary situation? Can you please take this passport and do as he asks, right? And he takes the passport, right? He says, I'll be right back, right? And he disappears in the back room, right? And I had expectation that some miraculous thing was going to happen. And if it didn't, I thought I was going to faint, actually, because it was just too amazing, just already what happened. So he was gone for about 15 minutes, and he came out again sweating. His shirt was like wet. He came out and he said, I have no idea why my supervisor did this, but I'm giving your friend a multiple entry visa into the UK. He said, we have never done this in this office ever before. He said, your friend must be something special. I said, definitely he is. And he handed me the passport, and I was so excited, that this happened. So I went outside, and in front of Croydon, there's a big brick sort of street. It leads out to the bus, so I was going to get on a bus. So I walk up to the bus, and I hardly can think about change and how I'm going to do this. And all of a sudden, this little Morris Minor, do you know what a Morris Minor is? Those little bubble cars that look like Volkswagen vans? Volkswagen Bugs, but it's made by British. The old yellow and black taxi cabs. They have them in Pakistan and India. They're like from the 1950s. One of these pulls up, right, in front of me. The door swings open, and inside is stuffed to the hilt with about 6 Eritreans, and Sheikh Bashir Uthman sitting in the back, right, with his suitcase on his lap. And he says, Dad, right? And I said, okay, where I'm going to sit. And one guy gets out, and he comes in, and he sits down on my lap, and we're all squished into this thing. He says, airport, right? And he doesn't even ask me for the passport. It's like he's on his way. I'm sitting there with my rational mind, thinking, Sheikh, you got it. He said, Madash. And he took the passport out of my hand, put it in his pocket. He said, airport, yalla, right? We got to the airport with it on exactly like within seconds of him, because he had booked some flight that he had to go. And he got on the plane, and he went to Morocco. He officiated at the wedding, and then he came back. Now, okay, so how does this happen, right? I can't give an explanation. The only thing that I derived from it was, again, that he was inspired by this moment, and that he gave this dhikr out of a inner direction from the depth of his own heart, from the hidayat that came to his heart. And I believe that he didn't really know if it was going to work or not, but he knew that he had to do that anyway. He had to still act on what he thought was the right thing to do at the right moment to do it. And it all came about in this miraculous way. And what that gave me was that, again, an insight into the way that we see the world, that often it is not the process and formulaic thing, that things happen. If you think about the things that have happened in your own life, some of the most incredible things, maybe the most incredible person that you ever met, maybe your spouse that you met, maybe a friend, a sheikh, a sister, a brother, an opening to business, whatever it was, that it came about in a way that you were surprised about how it all happened. That that you experienced it in a miraculous way. It was not in your hand. Somehow it was in the hand of, it is in the hand of Allah Azza wa Jal, that something came about to make these things happen. And I think that what makes it special, the special, I think, idea here for each one of us, what we can take away from it, is that we have to become so sensitive to what our heart is telling us, so that when we do act, we check with that. We check with the heart. Is it the right thing to do? Is it coming from my heart? Is it coming from my personal agenda? You may hit and miss for a while, because you're becoming more and more sensitive. But it's where we need to start, and where we have to accept where we are, and read the heart, read the signs, read what is in front of us, and then act, and then have no expectation other than we know that Allah will bring us the best. And so in the end of the day, no matter what happens, the best comes. Because you're expecting, like Sheikh Muslim said yesterday in that beautiful hadith, I am in my slave's opinion of me. It's a big statement, it's a big tradition. I am in my slave's opinion of me. It means if you are looking in your own heart for the best and the ultimate, Allah is with you. Allah is with you. So you will always get the best outcome. That's what it is. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Adina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين. الحمد لله.